Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Reina. Just when you
Hi.
say, there you go. Hey, we
I know
literally,
it's funny.
we,
Some
we
people go,
just,
Raina Rose.
we just basically recorded them as the full podcast. We were talking so much. Reina, please. I always say, I'm going to change it up. The new question of the day. So it is, what defines you?
What defines me?
It's a deep question.
That is a deep question. I would say it's like a combination of faith and contemplation and connection. Though I have to admit, connection's been hard for me since my brother passed. And I haven't realized that until recently. I've been doing a lot of inner work and realizing like connection's so important to me. But I've been holding people at arm's length because it's like I've lost the most important person to me. And now I sometimes like keep that distance, but connection is to me so important. Like even in my book is like connection with God, connection with self, connection with others. And I really wrote it to myself because I'm like, I need to connect again.
That kind of relates to what you do, though, because being the soul nutritionist as well. Like, I mean,
It does.
life's everything about connection. Even if you want to talk about connection with food, or if you want to talk about
Hmm.
connection with just people, I feel like when you have a conversation with somebody, it's easy to tell if someone's actually into it. Like a lot of times, you'll find something like there's episodes I've done where it's like feels like I'm going through the muck. Where I'm like, are you even interested in what's going on? Are you trying to get something for yourself? That's why when I was messaging you, I was like, this is not an interview; it's a conversation,
Yeah.
because conversation is meant to be a back and forth banner between two people, and that can get lost in translation because in the world of today we don't know how to have conversations anymore. They get sent through a
Right.
message or sent through text. It's like if you're I would correlate it to like if you're dating. So when you're dating, you're on Tinder, you're on whatever app, you can easily like take as long as you want to respond to somebody with a nice thought answer, like a good one, like, oh, one
Uh-huh.
good, hey, how are you doing? I'm doing about as good as you're looking. That could be an easy thing a person can take and sit on for 15 minutes for them to think that up, not on the spot. And then you realize when you're on the date with the person, like this person is fucking bland. I'm not getting anything. They're not as like they were when they were on their
I think they were
phone.
so funny in
Yeah.
writing. I just thought they were busy. They'd take so long to respond.
And that's like something that's prime importance, especially like kind of like my whole shtick here is like to be able to kind of like talk to people and really find that conversation, because I think we all have it. I just think the muscle, it needs to be worked. You need to talk to people on an everyday basis, or you're just going to be miserable in life. I mean, you can sit. Don't get me wrong. I like my alone time.
Yeah, me
Um,
too.
I love sitting in isolation, but then after a month or so, and after like maybe even a couple weeks, you're like, I need to experience the world. I need to talk to someone. I need to feel like I'm being heard. Then when someone says, good morning, it's like a hug for your soul. You're like, oh my God, I'm not alone in the universe.
Definitely, definitely. It's funny, you made me think of I was telling you before the show that I used to flight attend on a private jet, and this client would be in all different countries. He had homes and I remember when I got back to America, I'd be like, "Bonjour, hello." I would forget. I always joked like I didn't have a lot of jet lag as far as sleep. I'm a really good sleeper, but I would have language lag. Like I would forget which country I'm in when I went to automatically respond to something.
That's got I see. What do you think about the automatic response though? Like, I mean, obviously a lot of people use it. I use it too, especially like out in the day and stuff, but it just seems weird, doesn't it? Like, especially when you're talking about connectivity with people, like I call
Yeah.
it false connectivity. It's like, I'm not going to ask you how your day is and then walk away as I'm asking you, because then it's like, you're not even waiting for the response. I started noticing this with sympathy and empathy. I think
Mhm.
that we replaced empathy with sympathy, because every conversation I get into now, like if I'm talking to someone at my work or something, it's immediately I'm hearing a speech, a million things about their life. And I'm like, oh my God, you haven't like been able to vent or talk to anybody about this. It's like this
Mm,
is the reason why I think people are starting to see a high number of people going to therapy, is because we need someone to vent to, someone to talk to. You used to be able to get that with a neighbor, a close friend, or
uh-huh.
even a family
Several
member.
with
Yeah.
your whole village, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of the breakdown of society in a way is that we don't have those villages anymore. I see a lot of mom posts on people's Instagrams. And it's like, because you were supposed to have a whole community supporting you in having a kid. It's not something you're supposed to do on your own or just two people. Like, and I definitely feel you on that automatic connection versus a nice conversation. Cause I have a show as well. And I mostly for me, it's also just a conversation, especially on the show, the Soul Nutrition show. On the show about sustainability, it's more of an interview. It's quick. But I've had people on the Soul Nutrition show who think they're in an interview, and I usually just have like a couple of questions, but then I let it become a conversation. And I ask them about, their business or whatever they're on there for, and the answers are like 30 seconds. And I'm sitting here going, oh my gosh, we still have like most of the hour to fill. And I'm trying to find something they're interested in, because obviously it's not their business, that they came on for, because I can only get 30-second answers. And so like sometimes finally I get onto their family or their spouse or something that they're actually interested in. And then we can keep the show rolling as well, because we have an hour to fill no matter what. But then also I find out like what they really are passionate about, because once I got into this family or the spouse or, a sport, then they really start talking, and it's like, okay, this is what you love. You do your business, but you love this aspect of your life.
It's even better when they give you an answer. Like, I'll give you the short story of the long story version. It's like, hold on a second, we got time to fill. That's kind of the point of the whole long story. But that's why I started changing up the question at the beginning, because a lot of people, like, they're not passionate about their job. They're just doing it to work. And I'm like, I end up getting to that later. I think it's like conversations like finding a puzzle piece. Like, you just got to find what makes that person light up the most. Like, what's their trigger button? Like, oh my God, I love this. And the next thing you know, you're talking about like video games, you're talking about movies, you're talking about whatever. I'm like, that's the fun part of it, is to know that like there are people out there that are passionate about something. At least for me, that's an energy thing. I mean, like that, I love to, chat with you about finding out what you're interested in. I mean, you tell me you're the host of a show. So what does the show focus on?
So the show's called Soul Nutrition, and we say the various ways of nourishing your soul. It actually started, so it's a very conservative network, and I was on their magazine when my book was supposed to come out last year, but COVID and all kinds of stuff has like really delayed it. And so, it was going to come out then. So I was in their magazine anyway, and it came out, and for me, like my family's pretty liberal for the most part, like especially on my dad's side, and it just came out with like all this conservative like jargon on it. I won't even get political about it, but it was political and anyway. So I was like, okay, not going to do that magazine again. But then they called me up. They're like, our audience really loved you. We'd like you to do a show for us. And I'm like, yeah, no, I don't think so. And so they asked me again, because they were charging me, I was like, no, definitely not. They lowered the price to like almost nothing. I still said, I don't think so. And then, I pray in what's called like contemplative prayer, where when I was younger, I would just like beg God for stuff and then explain to him how to fix my problems. Like that was prayer for me.
I don't know
Like,
how
God,
many
just so
times I asked for superpowers and never got them.
what? Yes, well, I'll be like, God, this is my problem, and this is how you should fix it. Like
I
that
just
was my
found out
prayer.
Jesus is on Twitter. I didn't know.
Awesome. I always wanted Jesus to be on something like Twitter, so I could be like, hey, Jesus, I just had a question.
Apparently him and Satan go back and forth on it. I see some tags where they're tagging each other. I'm like, what is going on right now?
Oh my gosh, I should tag them just for like, to get in on that mess. But so now I pray like contemplative prayer, which is more of a meditation. And so I just like sit in silence and allow, for me, I say God or Jesus. Some people could say the universe, or divine intelligence to speak. And so as I was in that contemplative prayer, and that show came up, and it was like, well, what better place to have a peaceful show where I've had monks on the show. I have people who've like brought clean water to nations all over the world. And I didn't even know that like a jumbo jet full of kids die every day, basically from diarrhea because they had dirty water. Kids under 5, a whole jumbo jet full. And so
that's the same thing with in Africa. There's a thing called
Mhm.
Haitian Mud Cookies, which are
Mm.
they take dirt and they take salt, and it's basically 95% dirt and 5% salt. And what they do
Mm.
is they basically eat these mud cookies, and it stuffs their stomach, like just packs
Yeah.
it filled, so they can get off the
Make
point of
them.
starvation. Apparently, I've heard they're really good. I used to work with a Haitian woman. She's like, my grandma has the recipe to make them taste like snickerdoodles. I'm like, I fucking think it still probably tastes like dirt.
Right, it's still dirt.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like, some of the protein shakes and stuff, they say like, "Oh, this tastes like an Oreo cookie," and you're like, "No, it doesn't."
Tastes like somebody
But
dropped an Oreo cookie on the floor and mashed it with their foot.
yeah, and the dirt too. Yeah, so anyway, I just had this, like, kind of, download, if you will, of what better place to have a really peaceful message with really cool guests who have a different perspective, um, than on a super fundamentalist, you know, Republican, very conservative show. And so like I've had, I bring on a lot of guests that are like from the Republican Party and they would totally agree with on the network. And then I'll bring like an LGBTQ friendly pastor who this side totally wouldn't agree with, and just like I don't want either side necessarily to change their mind, but just ask new questions. Like I've brought up on there, like, could we love a terrorist? And I tell a story about, when I was in France, I was singing at one of the churches there, and we had this program for undocumented minors. When the refugees would come up and they were under 18, we would help them get their paperwork in order so they could work in France. Well, one of the boys was like this beautiful, tall, strong Black boy from Ivory Coast. And he told us his story. And when he was at the pool, you could see like these whip marks down his back just from being imprisoned at one point. But what happened was he was in Ivory Coast and ISIS was trying to recruit him. And so he ran away to the next town. Well, they found him. He ran away to the next city. They found him. So finally, he hopped on top of like train cars and semi trucks and made it like pretty much to the border of Africa and France, or I mean, Spain, Africa, and Europe. And he was imprisoned there. And they like starved him, they whipped him. And this guy helped him escape. He made it out, starved across the desert, finally made it into Europe, and eventually made it to France. Well, it got me thinking, like, wow, would I have had the courage to do all of that to avoid like getting recruited by something I didn't want to do? And I'm like, I think about how many terrorists or different things like that didn't have that kind of courage that my beautiful friend Sharif, who's like the most kind boy I've ever met, had he had just a little less courage, he would be ISIS, right? Just a little less. And he would have been, if he wouldn't have gone from the town to the city all the way across the
It's
continents.
it's crazy you just brought that up because literally this morning I had got a message on an old video of an old podcast I used to do when this was first starting out. I ended up doing another one called Fill in the Blank, which was like we would focus on specific topics. And I remember hearing in a Joe Rogan episode a guy named General Butt Naked. Um, the name basically gives away what he did, but he was a African warlord that fought naked, and he believed that he was the son of God. Like he was basically Jesus himself. He believed that his nakedness would stop bullets from hitting him. Well, this comment was on a video from a year ago. I click
Mhm.
on it and she's like, I can't believe that you're supporting an African warlord and his terroristic crimes, a guy who used to eat babies. And I was like, yes. But as we understand as a society, is that our education evolves and we base everything on where we're from. What
Yes,
listen,
that's empathy right there.
if you watch the documentary of General Butt Naked, he has completely did a 180. He is actually spending a lot of his millions of dollars and trying to stop African warlord people from being conform to these armies. He's breaking up child soldier camps. He's building homes for the people in Africa. And I'm like, and he's still saying he wants to be tried for his crimes, even though he
Wow.
found Christ. So I look at that, I'm like, should we condemn him for what he did? Yeah, what he did was wrong, but he'll pay with that if there's an afterlife. At the same time, I look at him as what he's doing now. He's completely changed his ways. And she had commented on a video from a year ago. I'm like, I was gonna comment back and be like, what the like find another hobby, yo. Take up knitting. Like, do you need to put your input on a video that has 10 views? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. But
Awesome. She liked your stuff so much. She's gone all the way back to a year
that's the
ago.
one podcast I stopped doing, and it's actually getting a lot of positive feedback and negative feedback. It's like all focused on like government programs and all this other stuff. That's like people are like, I did my research paper on this. I'm like, cool. Can you like my actual one? Like the one I actually want to row.
Right, the one that's current.
Yeah, but it was interesting to me because it was the aspect of how I like to look at history. When people say, "Oh, George Washington was a bad guy and all these things were bad people," or
Yeah.
Native Americans weren't that good either. But I got into a
Right.
conversation with an anthropologist, and I was talking to her. It's not that they're bad people. What they did is wrong in our eyes now because as a society, we have evolved to progress to a better form of being in touch with our emotions and being in touch with the feelings and rationality of others. But that gets disconnected with social media. It's where I talk about empathy and sympathy that have been replaced.
Absolutely.
You're supposed to not eat people. That's amazing. I'm glad we don't do that anymore. But
Yeah.
back in the day, that was a thing that they thought of based on religious reasons and also at what their knowledge was at where they were from.
Mhm.
We shouldn't look at them as savages or barbarians or crazy people. We should look at how, as a society, we have progressed way past that. And I think
Well, yeah.
people want they want something to string up. They want something to blame or say that this needed to change because they're animals. And I'm like, don't look at them as animals. Consider that for the time period. Look at how, as a society, how amazing we have grown. Think of it in a positive light, and you're going to get a positive response instead of negativity where people are fighting their own friends and family.
Yeah, and I mean, that's really the basis of empathy, and it's interesting, I keep going to this alt MBA because I it's amazing how many practical real life things we're learning on top of business things, but did this exercise on empathy, and you have to go in and see the worldview of the person that you're empathizing with, and it's usually we have to do it with someone you disagree with, and so, like you're saying, back in the day, or even if you just come from another society that is not, so much in this century, you're going to have a different worldview. If you've grown up your whole life that people eat babies and this is what happens, your worldview is different than someone, if you come from a westernized Judeo Christian background. I mean, the Jews have been saying don't eat babies since, Moses's time, but other cultures around them still were. So, but if you were from one of these other cultures, your worldview is that's okay. That's you sacrifice it to this god, or that's what it was. And so, when I'm looking at someone now and I don't agree, I have to go back and think, what's their worldview? Why do they believe they're right? Because almost nobody does things when they don't think they're right. If they do, they're going to hide it, right? But if they're doing something publicly, they think they're doing the right thing. And so if I vehemently disagree with that, how can I look into where are they from? What was their upbringing? What was their culture? How were they raised? What are they surrounded by now? What kind of voices do they have? And that's going to explain why they think they're right in whatever they're doing, whether that's feeding babies. But and then I love that General Butt Naked, is it?
Yeah.
I love that he's out changing that, because how much better for someone who used to eat babies, who used to, go out and do these things, that he's now saying, hey, this probably isn't right, and I want to let you all know, than some, missionary who's white coming into this crowd and saying, don't do this, don't do that. Like, that I can't go say that. He can. I mean, I can, but who's going to listen, right? You're going to, when someone from your own tribe and your own background and your own worldview and paradigm comes in and says, hey, I don't know if this is the right way of doing things, and I'm actually going to make sure I'm tried for these crimes, then I'm going to go, oh, someone from my own worldview is saying this is wrong. Maybe I should pay attention.
Well, it's like if I told you that eating a McDonald's cheeseburger every single day was going to be the best thing ever. You're going to lose weight, you're going to do all these things, and you were grown up to know that lifestyle, you would continue doing it until someone shattered your illusions on how that was fake and how that was false information. I mean, the sugar industry did it big with the fact that
Yes,
they
they
tried to
did.
blame fat. They blamed fat
Hmm.
for being the cause of you eat fat, you're going to get fat. Next thing you know, it turns out it's the sugar industry. You eat too much sugar, it's bad for you. And it's actually, you need essential fats in your body to produce hormones
Yes.
and these types of things.
Hmm.
It's a whole shift. And this is what I have a problem with where the world's going right now is all this information is like white lied. Everything throughout history has been like not telling the whole truth or telling it in a glamorized version. Then people find out about it later and then we get pissed off. I'm like, people have a loyalty and have a pack mentality, but when you lie to them, they don't know what to believe, and then they start thinking everything's a lie. That's the hardest part, is trying to find, like, when I like to think of myself as a bit of an empath when it comes to talking to people. I can kind of sense, like, I'm nice to everybody. I'm either, you can't say I'm a nice person or a mean person. You just say I'm freaking Robbie. But when I talk to people, I can tell if it's like an open door, if it's like a house with a front door that says you're welcome to come in and have that conversation. Then I
Yeah.
see a lot of people nowadays where it's like built up walls, where it's like I need to cross a moat and three different alligators to get into like a conversation stance with you. And I think it's a matter of a fact. The same reason when I messaged you, it's like how I message everybody. And
Yeah.
surprisingly, it's when I say I'm not looking to attack you or anything, and people don't understand that, because the way the world has gone to so far is that it must have been something I posted. It must have been something that they're commenting they don't agree with me with. That's what they're trying to do. And then you have to listen for yourself. And then there you go. But it's that thing, is no, the authenticity in the world is gone. I'm like, where's that? It's still here. It's gotta be. People are known to be creative, and I think
Yeah.
there's more good people on this earth than bad, but all we get shown is the bad, and that projects even more badness out into the world. And then people are just afraid to even leave their homes. Netflix is so much easier.
Right. And it keeps you company in some ways. You know, as you were speaking, I really, a lot of what I talk about in everything I do, including the book, is really like awareness. And so the book Sin Tastes Good, it's all about like comparing nutrition, which I started out life as like a personal trainer and Pilates instructor at Equinox, and learned a lot about nutrition, always studied like the blue zones and ways to live longer. And then I apply that to a spiritual sense and spiritual questions. And I think whether it's food or like religion and spirituality and faith, you have to take the knowledge you can get. Okay, fat's bad, sugar's bad. I need to do this, I need to do that, and you need to see how that feels in yourself. Okay, if I eat a full diet full of no fat and all these carbs and sugars, how do I feel? And take note. You have to really like begin to get in tune with yourself, which takes time and awareness. We were talking about fasting before the show. For me, when I fast, I don't really get that hungry, because when my brother died, I unintentionally fasted for a month. And so now if I do 3 days or 5 days, I'm almost never hungry, but I am bored. And what I do is I like go to the cupboard or the fridge and I open it up and I realize I'm not hungry. And then I ask myself, what am I trying not to feel? Because obviously I'm having some sort of emotion right now. And I want to soothe this with food, because that's what we do as humans. And so, whether it's emotions or it's food in our diet, we can get the knowledge and the wisdom. That's important. But to sift that knowledge and wisdom, you have to apply it and then feel it out. And, for some people, keto really works for them. That's their thing. For some people, vegan really works for them. But you have to test it in your own body and feel. I feel so much more energetic when I do this thing or that thing. I feel, my skin clears up when I do this one or that, because first of all, we're all different, right? And second of all, you're right. There's all these conflicting information out there, and people don't know what to believe. But instead of just blindly believing like that's right, try it. Try it on for 6 weeks. See if your skin clears up, see if you have more energy, and if not, try the other thing. And, keep experimenting and see what your truth is, because your truth might not be my truth.
Well, it's just good. It's good advertising, is the fact of why so many people feel like they get robbed and stuff. It's like they're show you a picture of a dude with a six pack and say that he took this pill or something, and you can get that. Let me tell you something. I have a six pack, and you don't keep it 24/7. You drink a
Nope.
drink, you get bloated with water weight. Next thing you know, it's gone. That's why you need to follow real bodybuilders. You need to follow real people that experience. I have a gym addiction, and the only person I've been able to relate that with is two people on this earth. One was a transgender person that could relate on the aspect of being body dysmorphic. Um,
Yes.
that example of being in, like, seeing yourself in the mirror, not being comfortable in your own skin, is something that's always been for me.
Yeah.
Not on the aspect of gender, more on the aspect of looks. I'm always constantly judging myself on looks. But Ronnie Coleman, He's so addicted to the gym. There's literally a video of him where the doctor's like, if you just stop working out, take a rest day, you will be fine. Your muscles will go back. They won't be so atrophied. But he's in crutches on his arms and he's
Oh,
doing freaking bicep curls because he's like, I can't just not work out. And he's like doing bicep curls. But he talks about it. He's had 12 back surgeries, 4 hip replacements, and he's only like, I think in his 50s. Like he's not that old of a guy, and it's just because
yeah.
he's squatting 450 pounds. He was 0.3% body fat.
Wow.
That's like 1/3% of body fat.
Yeah.
1%. And he was like
Uh-huh.
300 something pounds doing like crazy stuff. He's 8-time Mr. Olympia. But it's an amazing story. But like people think like I gotta buy his product. I gotta buy his product. I gotta buy his product. No, you don't. You need to find what works for you. That
Right.
man talked about eating Arby's and Burger King while he was working out. So
A lot of bodybuilders do.
I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure you just need to find what your
I
niche
started
is.
out at Gold's Gym as a trainer, so I was around that all the time, like, especially right after it was like Arby's and pizzas. I'm like, no one can eat and drink more than trainers can, and lifters and things like that. But to that guy, I would also say, what am I trying not to feel? There's something he doesn't want to feel,
Sometimes
and
it's
so
it's it's it's
go to the addiction.
therapy. It's
Mhm.
that's what I tell people. Like before I even do a podcast, I work out at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then I'm done at 6. And I've done that every day for 8 years. And I know I said it was the last time I was going to say that in like a past episode, but it keeps the demons away. I tell people when you sit there and you do your meditation where you look inside of yourself. If
Mm,
I'm an insomniac, so I don't sleep. So I am constantly being surrounded by my own thoughts, and a lot of my thoughts aren't positive ones. And I can tell when when that negativity starts to creep in. And that's around the time when it's been almost a full 24 hours since my workout because I've used that as
yeah.
my form of therapy for so long.
Yeah.
It keeps me leveled. It's able to have a conversation like this because if right now if I was thinking about the gym, this conversation wouldn't happen. I'd be like, sorry, I got something I got to do, and then I head out. But once I get leveled with that, it puts me in a place where I can sort out things that are in my own life. And I've started to try and really think, I guess I want to put this out there into the world of a thing that we should be doing as people, looking inside of ourselves and finding what makes us uncomfortable. What is that thing that makes us so, I guess, so disgusted or so like, oh, this is my problem for sure. I can tell like this is the issue I definitely need to fix, but I'm not worried about it. Me, I have an ego issue. I noticed it from about a year and a half ago when people started giving me compliments. So now I reject all compliments. I'm
Yeah.
fine with like, thank you. I appreciate that, but I'm good. And I'll move it. I'll pass it on like, you're awesome. That's what it is. Because once you feed that ego, you're letting in the door for, I'm okay where I'm at. And once you start
Mhm.
letting in the door for I'm okay with I'm at, you'll never be happy and you'll just be feeding off compliments the whole time. There's a level of acceptance and then there's a level of what you should keep aspiring to be. Our biggest enemies can be ourselves at times. And I look at like all the anxieties, all the depression, all these things, they're made by us and a lot of factors around us. But we
Mm,
let a lot of these things get into our heads. I suffer from depression, I suffer from anxiety, but a lot of it is the fear of being made fun of, being whatever.
yeah.
Then my cousin just tosses at me, why do you give a shit? What do you care about the person in the store because oh you're not wearing a good jacket so you can't walk in the store with sweatpants on? Why do you care if you're only going to see them for 5 minutes? What do you care? And I'm like,
Yeah.
you're right. Why do I care? But it's future worrying. We worry about the future. We worry about how we're going to look. We worry about what we have. We worry about all these things that mean nothing in the grand scheme of things. If you have to change your perspective onto something bigger, change it into the perspective of the world. How minuscule you are on that radar of what the world is. The world doesn't care if you die or not. People will around you, but the world is a grand scheme of things and it's constantly moving whether you don't pay your gas bill or not. So once you have that perspective in things, why are you thinking on the closed mindset of fear of what your neighbor will think of you? What why can't I say I'm a this type of Republican, whatever you want to say?
Right.
Why can't you say that because you're afraid of if your neighbor will come and take your sign down from your lawn? And then the
Correct.
bigger question, why do they give a shit? Like I guarantee you all these people that are talking about, please vote. I'll say right now, I'm not voting. I'm not going to, but the funny thing is, once whoever gets elected, I'm not going to complain about who's being elected. I,
I have a policy of that. I say, if I am unwilling or unable to do anything about it, so if I'm unable, I just can't, or I'm unwilling, I'm not going to. I abdicate my right to bitch about it. Like if I'm not going to do anything, like for me, I'm actually, I don't really support either. So I'm voting for like this independent, who's an
Ford
official independent. So
Jorgensen.
it's not, no, Jade Simmons. She's this Black woman who's running. And I actually volunteered to be one of her electoral college. I don't know if it ended up going through, but like, the chance of her actually getting it is minuscule, but I'm like, I'm not actually throwing away the vote because it's to an official candidate, which I've thrown away my vote before. Like I remember one year I couldn't vote for either candidate. I just didn't feel good about either. So my roommate at the time wanted to be president one day. So I was like, Courtney Gilson. And I'm like, if you ever become president, I gave you your first vote. Cause I'm like, I'm exercising my right that I voted. I'm not like just, being apathetic about it in any way. But I can also say like I don't really agree with either. So that's what I'm doing. But I love your perspective too. It's like if I'm not going to go do anything about it, I'm not going to bitch about it afterward. I know somebody who would talk about every political thing and they were like in their late 40s and had never voted. And they were like had strong political opinions about how things should be done and they had never voted in like almost 50 years old, you know?
I look at like even if a bad song comes on, or I'm like, why do you sit there and hate it so much? It's like, why don't you just change the thing? It's like, if you don't like the video, then move on to the next one. But like,
Yeah,
we're so fueled by being pissed off or upset at things. It's like, you never write a good
that's
review.
an addiction in
You're
itself.
more, well, you're more likely to write a bad review. And I'm like, why does everything have to be a conflict? Why can't it just be as simple as just doing something? Like I'm starting to believe in karma a little bit, just because a lot of things happened recently that were like, oh shit, like I gave a guy a ride home, who worked at McDonald's at like 3 o'clock in the morning. Gave him a ride home, and then next thing you know, he ends up working a Food Line a month later, and I am short a couple of dollars, and he
Oh.
covers me. So I'm like, damn, that's fucking awesome. He's like, yeah, you gave me a ride home. I'm like, yeah. And then he tells me about his podcast. Like everybody's got a podcast. Uh, but it's like it's that type of thing. It's like just even doing something and not expecting a return on things. It's doesn't just it has a payoff. It's not money, it's not stuff, it's not possession. It is something for your soul. And I
And
didn't
it
know exactly
for
what
your
the soul
soul.
was until those moments.
I love that because that's like the subtitle of the Sin Tastes Good book is Nourishing Your Soul in an Empty Calorie World. And it's all about like, what is the soul? How do you connect to your soul? And it's experiences like that. And I only share this because I just made these and I shared this with my group last night. But I make them all the time. I've actually been making them for years. So I have these little cards and they say beloved on them. And I keep them in the different cars that are at this house. And I make sure I have at least a couple in the glove box at all times. And if anytime I see a homeless person, I give them a card and it's got like an encouraging note in there and $5, And the last time was like maybe Monday night, I gave this to a person and they just received it and they're like, I haven't gotten something like this in so long. Like they were so, and I've sometimes gone out of my way to drive and give one to someone, and then I have to reverse and go the way I was actually going, and I'll see them crying that someone because sometimes I'll say like, if you received this, I prayed for you, which I do. I'll like drive away and pray for that person, and just for them to be like, someone cares enough to pray for me. Someone went out of their way to come give me this, and it rewards me. I've never met a person, later on personally that I've given one to, and I've probably given out hundreds in over the years. And, but it rewards me. It makes me know that like, you know, I would want that if I were, in that situation. I would want someone to write me like a note and give me money too, because just writing me fancy words doesn't help me eat, you know?
Well, it's crazy because if you write something like that, a lot of times, like it'll say, like, "Beloved, like I'll pray for you." Any of these types of things, somebody reads it and goes, "Pray for me. I'm not religious," and then they throw the card away. It's like, hang on a second. It's more than just bringing up an issue with the fact that you're not religious. It's more of the fact of like, if somebody's doing something out of the kindness of their heart, thinking about you in a time where you're struggling, and you're going to complain that you're not religious, and then you start making fun of them for being religious. It's like, I'm not a religious person, but if somebody says, I'll pray for you, I go, thank you. I say thank
Yeah.
you. I said, I'm dealing with a lot right now, and I appreciate that you're at least thinking of me. Like, that's the whole thing. But
Even
it's,
if you believe in law of attraction, you're
yeah.
going to be like, yeah, give me some prayer because I just want some of those positive vibes, right? I mean,
I think if too much goes right into your life, you might be like, it might be a sign that you're going to die. Like, I hit a green light on the way home. Like, I never happens. There's like 50 lights. So I hit a green on every single one of them. And I was like, I'm not leaving this house for the rest of the night because I'm pretty sure I'm about to die. Like, I had one of those
yeah,
moments.
that's the only way that could have happened.
It's like it either goes correct 100% or it goes wrong 100%. So I'm like, I'm on the, I would like to be 50 for 50.
Yeah, I think that's one thing about, I don't know, I was talking to someone about, teen suicides and suicide attempts and stuff like that. And I think that, the longer we live, we realize there's these ups and there's downs, there's ups and it's like waves, right? And when you're a teenager, and I know like when I was a teenager, I attempted suicide, I took a whole bottle of pills one night, like just, I thought it was never going to get any better because you've never gone up and down enough to know that like, okay, right now sucks. I'm not receiving Maslow's hierarchy of needs, except for like probably the bottom ones because I live at my parents' house, but like the acceptance and love and all this stuff that I crave as a human being, I'm not getting. And so I feel like it's never going to get any better. And if it's never going to get any better, I just want to end this, and this is, we see a lot of, high school and suicides and things like that. But as you get older, and granted, we see it in people who are older as well, but you begin to see that there's ups in lives and there's downs in life. Sometimes everything's going right. When I was flying on that jet, I was like, life could never get any better. This is amazing. Like I'm getting paid to be like, and live a billionaire's lifestyle and fly around on private jets and go to cool islands, but then there's been down times where like, I actually changed my name because of suffering abuse. And like, I felt like when I was Melissa, I played small and I didn't want to say anything and I didn't want to lose that amazing job. And then I was like, you know what? Reina stands up for justice, even in the face of loss. And if I can't stand up for justice in the face of losing a job, how will I stand up in the face of more important things? And then I went through downs, but when you've been through enough up and downs, it will go up again. And that's the tough thing. If you haven't had a whole lot of life to see like, okay, it goes up, goes down, goes up, goes down. And it's kind of like the stock market, usually consistently gets a bit better.
How
Then
hard was that for you when you lost your brother, though? Like, I mean, when you lost your brother, for instance, like, that hearing you say about the ups and downs, I think you need to talk to people that are seasoned. I believe that there are some
Mhm.
people I look at and I'm like, you haven't experienced a fucking thing. Like, there are
Yeah.
some people where I'm just like, where's the trauma? Where's the trauma? I don't see the trauma. But like, I'll share this so if you want to share your
Yeah.
thing too. September was the hardest month for me. My birthday, I spent all in the emergency room, so I didn't even get to spend my birthday. And then from dealing with that, it's just been severe lower degradation of pain all the way
Mhm.
into where I'm at now. But in September, my grandmom came out as having cancer, and then she was been hiding it for so long to now at the point where it's like we're lucky she's even alive. And then I lost 3 friends in a matter of 2 weeks. So
Mm.
that at one point I was like, might as well, it does. There's no happiness from here. It's just
Yeah.
I need this pain to stop.
Mhm.
But I'm about a month and a half. Actually, I think it might have been like around July, not September, but it's been a couple
Mhm.
months since this issue happened, and I don't even think like can't even think about what place I was in back then. The thing is that close grip, that tunnel that seems like this pain is never going to stop. It's got
Mhm.
such a hold on you where you think this is going to be like this for fucking ever, and life is not like that. Life has, and this is just me saying this today. Tomorrow I could be a whole different perspective, but
Absolutely. You
it's
know,
those
yeah.
ups and downs you talk about.
That's it. And you talk about talking to someone who's seasoned, who's been through it. And I was really lucky. So when my brother died, I mean, I literally, oh, I had been having brunch with him and the family a couple hours. He went out on a motorcycle ride. Him and his friends were driving back, and this off-duty police officer came on his motorcycle, flying around the corner, and the two motorcycles hit each other straight on. Their hearts detached from the chambers, both riders. And my brother was on a big, huge, like Harley style bike, a Honda Shadow, and he's like a big dude as well. He went up, down, and I guess his head was bleeding everywhere, but he had a smile, and he looked like he was just laying on the sofa, and passed quickly. And the officer like spun across the lanes. My brother's roommate and the girlfriend who was wearing my helmet, unfortunately she had it up instead of down, and she got like cuts all over her face, and they thought she broke her back anyway. So they hit the officer, ejected, and his roommate ends up losing his arm too throughout this whole accident. Like, it's just this one guy, the officer who had been drinking and riding, just effed up everyone's life in an instant, right? And so there's anger there. There's depression. There's, when I looked at the police report and there was pictures of my brother in a body bag and I could recognize him exactly, I literally, the moment I found out, I grabbed the ground screaming. I grabbed the ground screaming for like 7 hours until I had no voice anymore. And I just wanted to like melt into the ground and die too. My brother was my best friend. Like, we grew up in the jungle of Brunei together because my dad used to fly jets for the Sultan. That's how I got into that. And I always joked like we were each other's best friends because we were each other's only friends half the time. And then when we came back to America, we just kind of stayed best friends for our whole lives. And so he was 24, I was 27. And, we had just been at brunch, shooting the breeze, joking at how like lame he looked with his little tea because he was a little bit sick, and like having a wonderful time. And then a couple hours later, I come home and he's gone. And so then, after the screaming, I didn't eat for like a month, and my friends would come and bring me like Ensures, like because if I'd see food, I'd just want to throw up. It just looked so gross. I couldn't even think about it. And so, normally, especially before this, and it might have been a little bit of honestly like fake it till you make it. Actually, it was like I needed to be positive all the time. I was like the person, I was a cheerleader in high school, and I had your positive mantra, and please don't rain on my parade, I'll give you a positive, but I had no empathy truly before this, because I was just like, I needed to be so positive. I couldn't stand anyone that wasn't like, I'd have to cheer them up instead of like really be with someone in that time. So anyway, I went from being the happiest person people knew to like a zombie. I mean, it looked like I was a shell of the person that they knew. And people were afraid because they kind of came to me for needing that positive light. And I just had none. I just had none. And thankfully, talking to some people who had been through it, I had a girlfriend who had lost her brother in a skateboarding accident. And I had the guitar player at our church lost his brother. And the guitar player at our church said, the second year is the hardest. Just so you know, like, this year sucks. It hurts, but you're really numb. And by the second year, don't feel like you're crazy. Because if I hadn't been told this, I would have thought, I'm getting worse. There's something wrong with me. Like, I should be getting better by now. But the thing is, you just start to feel in the second year, and everyone else is forgotten. Everyone else is healed because they weren't as close to the situation as you. And so when I got worse the second year, and it did get worse because it's like, now I'm really feeling Christmas without him. Now I'm really feeling his birthday go by. Now, instead of being numb, without someone having told me, hey, just so you know, this road gets a little lower before it goes up. I don't know what I've done. Honestly, I had been starting to get closer to God in like a really mystical kind of way through contemplation and stuff right before my brother died. And without that closeness too, I mean, I really had a hard time living without him. I still do. I'm like, I still tear up. It's been 10 years. And he, like I said, he was my best friend. I still dream about him all the time.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a tough story. I'm glad somebody talked to you and was able to comfort you too. At least give
Yeah.
you like, hey, it's gonna get a little bit worse, so don't think you're crazy. Like, I mean, the situation I had, I had to talk myself out of it, and that took a long time. I had some people that gave me a little bit of advice here and there, but it was like, I, it's so hard, especially when dealing, like we say, people with the biggest smiles are usually hiding the most trauma or hiding like the most difficult situation.
Mhm.
Biggest reference in the world, Robin Williams. That
Yeah.
man had, I think it's the aspire if we want people around us to feel good when we're feeling bad. It's just it sucks the air out of a room. It really does when something comes up. We're like, shouldn't have fucking asked that one, or it's that type of thing.
Yeah.
I think the world, like, you have an issue or people have an issue with something. Say, like I had a buddy that had he had a family issue go on, and I was talking to him, and he said, "Thank you for like actually listening to me, because that's all I just needed to get it out. I just needed to talk." And I was like,
Yeah.
I know, I kind of realized that." But he had turned to like 10 other people too, and everything was like, "Man, that sucks. Let me tell you about what's going on in my life." And then it's like, "Whoa, hold on a second. I'm the one that needs help right now." And and you realize we're all like bottling up a lot of pain. And I feel like a lot of that pain, it can be talked about with close friends for sure, but it can be talked about with anybody, but not expressed out like that. It needs to be like, let's get into a conversation. And if it leads down into that, or if it takes our mind off of the pain,
Yeah.
that is that is the best I can offer anybody, is that I can pull you out of a situation that you might not see a tunnel or you might not see anything out of. Not that I can understand every experience that everybody's experiencing out there, but I can get your mind off what you've been thinking about for a long
Mhm.
time. And I think that's important, and what more people need to learn how to do. It's just the objective idea of communication. You need to talk to
Right.
people. You need to
And we're
get
not
that
taught.
energy. Yeah.
We don't know, we don't learn in our society so much how to communicate with people, and that's one of the things I mentioned too is, sometimes people be like, "Oh, your brother died? My dog died last year, and I know just how you're feeling." And you're like, no, you don't." But then the best response that I really had was from someone who was very empathetic, and, the only thing she said is, "There's just no words." There's just no words. And there aren't. There when you're going through something, like you said, you had several friends die. I had another friend die like 2 weeks after my brother, and it was like such a haze. This was a guy I had like gone to winter formal with at school and stuff, and I was like, "Robert who? Wait, that Robert?" Like, all of a sudden and he was killed at a New Year's party. My brother died like 2 weeks before Christmas. And so like all these things happening in a row, and then for someone to be like, "I know just how you feel. My dog died." It was like I also realized though that they just didn't know what to say. And I remember I lost like 12 pounds in a week or something like that. And somebody who like just didn't know, like, well, at least you could lose some weight, in this society where that's like the best thing ever. And I remember being like, I would gain 100 pounds if you bring my brother back. Like, you know, but I think there's just this awkwardness. We don't know what to say when someone's in pain because we are not taught empathy as a culture in general. We're taught, let's be sunshine and smiles all the time. And if we're not sunshine and smiles, there's a real problem. So let's fix that problem. Um, and if we learn how to, in the Bible, it says like mourn with those who mourn, like to get on the level and be what do you need right now? Do you need me to just be here with you? Or do you need cheering up? Because I can do either. But if you don't need cheering up and that's just really gonna make you worse at this moment, I'll just sit here with you. And I had two friends who would like take turns and they would just come and sleep with me until I fell asleep so I wouldn't be alone. And they would just lay there, head out when I finally fell asleep because I was just so like
Got
I
some
was
good friends.
mhm. But they weren't there to cheer me. They just sat. They were quiet. There's nothing
Sometimes
to
it's
say.
even the presence of just being in the room really just lets people know that they're there when you need it. And I think that's what
Yeah.
we all need, is we need a reliance of, we have someone to lean on if it gets tough. I have a buddy, one of the first episodes I had, he's the only like, what really grinds my gears is when somebody makes me repeat myself. Like, I have somebody in my family, like, where I'll say something and they're like, "Well, I wasn't listening. What were you saying?" And then like I have to, even if I send it in a text, I'm like, just reread it, reread it. I'm not going to retext it. And
Right?
he does it on purpose. He's my
Ah,
best friend, and he does it on purpose. He goes, "I'm sorry, were you talking?" I'm like, "Dude, I know you heard me about what I just said." And he goes, what was it about again?" Like, trying to get me to go, and I'll just be quiet until like he loves that. But we don't talk for months. Like, I haven't talked to him since like July, and then I'll randomly get a message from him. Like, I got a message from him the other night that was like, "Hey, just making sure you're doing all right. Love you, man." I was like, "Love you too, bro." Right? It's just to know that if I ever needed a place to stay, it's his
Yeah.
house. If I needed someone to talk to, it's him. If I needed something, if something's crazy's going on in my life, it was that. And a lot of times you want to be alone too. I'm a self thinker. I'm a hermit when it
Me
comes
too.
to wanting to be with my own thoughts to figure things out. I mean, I had a text where I was finding out my grandma had cancer. Then the next day I found out my buddy fell off a 3-story balcony. Then a week later, my my buddy got into a car accident and then killed him and his passenger. And then not even the next day, I had somebody's mom come tell me that her son shot himself. And I'm like, woo! At this point, I was like, okay, really? Like, what's going on in the world today? And then, like, you have those moments where you can turn to religion. I'm not a religious person, but I was sitting there thinking, like, is there a bigger picture out there, really? Because you just don't want to think that after you die, you die.
Right.
And then I was just sitting there thinking, and somebody came up to me and was like, "Hey, like, you okay?" It was my supervisor at work. I'll give him a shout out. But I'm sitting there thinking, like, why don't I just, his pain doesn't seem like it's going away. And I've been thinking about this for a lot. And I haven't worked out today. So I'm like, are those thoughts are even twice as impacted? And he's like looking at me. I mean, we work at a gym. So it's like, he just looked at me. He goes, "You all right, man?" He's like, "You get a lift in today?" Because he understands it. I'm like, "Yeah, not yet." Afterwards. But I told him what was going on. He was like, "Dude, it's rough, man. I can't give you any answers. I don't know what that experience is like, but if you
Mm.
ever need people to talk to, look me up, man. You know where you know where I'm at, dude." So he goes, "Why don't you go get a workout in, and then if you want to talk afterwards, we can." And I said, "Thanks." And
Wow.
then afterwards, I felt so refreshed. But it was just that type of thing. I mean, I had witnessed in my town a woman crying on the bus. Nobody said a fucking word to her.
Yeah.
Nobody even acknowledged her existence, thinking that she's some crazy person because what we see on the news. And I just said to her, I was like, "Are you okay?" And
Yeah.
she starts telling me all these things that are going on in her life that's really just hit her. Something important in her life just happened. And I was like, "Oh my God." And then you sit there and you talk and then they feel better.
Yeah.
How many people are going to ignore that person? It's the same. Kyle Gates, I think his name was, the guy who jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and lived.
Mm.
He cried on a 45-minute bus ride and nobody said a word to him. And he said if somebody would have just asked how he was doing or said hi to him when he took that step off the bus to jump off the bridge, he might not have jumped. It's
Yeah.
that simple of stuff people don't realize is that we all play an effect in each other's lives. I watched a dude die at my work right in front of my eyes. I called 911. They brought him back to life. But in that moment, I my new policy, treat nice to every old person. I don't care if that's my new policy. I say hi to that guy every day. But
Yeah.
it's that thing of, why does it have to be so drastic for you to change? Why do you have to be at the end game? Why do you have to be obese? Why do you have to be diabetes? Why do you have to have stomach cancer? Why do you have all these things before you have to start fixing yourself? Why can't we stop
Mhm.
it before it gets to that point? But we don't realize the impact until it hits that red line.
Right. We don't have that catalyst for change a lot of times until something really drastic happens. Wow, that's just,
And
I
God,
was thinking
God
about
bless you for thinking all this stuff up in the morning. Holy crap! I know I'm hitting you
I
hard.
know. I like just barely woke up. But yet no, I was thinking about that person on the bus and our society these days, and I say the society, I get pulled into it too, where a text message or an email or, you know, a post or something that I have to do for something that makes money, I feel like we ignore the human experience to do what we're told we're supposed to do. We're supposed to make money. We're supposed to be effective. We're supposed
Supposed to
to,
get a job and work the 9 to 5.
yeah, and like, I mean, honestly, I've almost never had a real job in my life. I've been an entrepreneur since I was 19. I started my own fitness business actually at 19. But at the
Are you
same time,
hiring?
I don't have it anymore. I'm a little bit past 19. um, but I did have it for about eight years, and then I continued in fitness for another until 11 years total. But and I loved it. But yeah, I've taken a lot of risks with businesses and with different things that I've done, but I see in my friends and things as well, like we can't take risks. We have to like follow the corporate ladder and we have to do it this way. And we don't have time for friends because that's not making money. And I'm like, but then why are you making money? if you don't have friends, if you don't have time for the things money is for, why are you making it? Like, obviously we need a house and like
That's
basic
what you're
shelter.
told to do.
Exactly. And we've been kind of told as society that like your email is more important than that person's tears. So I'm going to sit like this as she cries right next to me.
Well, finding happiness, like it really hit me last year. Well, actually, over the summer, my cousin had lived with us for like 6 months, and he almost married into wealth. Basically, like they were flying private jets and getting like 5,000, like $10,000 dinners and stuff, and that was just a normal dinner for him. And I was like,
Yeah.
why did you leave that? Like, she was gorgeous, she was all these types of things, and you left that? Like, that seems like you would have locked it down, man. You wouldn't have to work a day in your life. And then he just goes, I wasn't happy.
Hmm.
Why would I want to be happy? Money doesn't mean anything to me. But then, like, he's buying an $8 Dunkin' Donuts coffee. I'm like, bro, we're on a budget now, bro. You got to learn how to budget lifestyle. This isn't the 50,000, whatever
Right.
plane rides and stuff. This is budget time. So it was weird seeing that shift in him of like trying to figure out, like, oh, wait, I don't have the money for that. And I'm like, yeah, you're regretting it now, aren't you? And he goes, I'm not at all, man. He goes, you don't
Yeah.
understand. Like, money's just an object and it's a thing. It gets us nice stuff. It gets us what we want. But if I have to cut things to try and live and be as happy or find where I feel like I am happy, I'm going to do so. Yeah, and then he tossed out like the fame thing too, which is like people that think of you like, oh, have the sweatpants confidence to walk in a store. What do you care what people think? And famous people, we're all on the same level. Nobody's higher up than anybody. If you're a Matthew McConaughey or if you're just a random person on the street, doesn't matter. Only thing I know is I know that person's name and I know the movie he's in. You're still could have a better conversation with you than I could with Matthew McConaughey. And he told me that because his babysitter was Sam Elliott. My cousin's
Yeah.
babysitter was Sam Elliott. And
I
I'm
have
like,
a friend
oh,
that's on Big Bang Theory. And,
really?
he's one of my wisest friends. And, the only reason I've actually ever watched the show is just to watch him in it. But like,
I would
um,
say Kaylee Kuko. That's
yeah,
the one I'm watching.
I haven't even owned a TV since like 2009, I think. But I would, if I was on an airplane, I'd watch it. If I was I would watch it if I saw it come on just to see him. But he's just a person, but he's an amazing person, way better person than he's portrayed on television. Like on television is kind of he's a flat character a little bit that it's just this one way. But in real life, I'll call him up and, talk about really deep things and
Are you talking about
relations.
Sheldon Cooper?
I won't say, but it's not Sheldon.
Can we say it off air?
I'll say it off air. Yeah.
Yes. If you're listening, haha.
But yeah, he's someone I call up when I really need some good wisdom and just a good conversation about life. And but it has nothing to do with him being famous.
Yeah. I mean, it's important. There's a thing my buddy just brought up to me recently, which was there was a trend going on a couple months ago where somebody would text either the number one digit above yours or number one digit below yours. And they would text you, hey, how's it going? I'm your number neighbor. Even something like that.
Huh, yeah.
Something so simple as even striking up a conversation can lead you to the biggest connections you've ever had in your life. I look at everyone like, why would I deny myself a conversation based on anything? It's about having peace with oneself. And I believe you'll never truly be at peace with oneself if you can't overcome the biggest enemy, which is yourself. And it's conflicting point of view because of the fact of you're never going to be able to overcome yourself. Yourself is going to be the biggest obstacle until you die. But
Yeah.
having the openness to realize that these people aren't your enemy. Nobody's your enemy. The only enemy is yourself. And that's because you stand in the way of your own aspirations, your own goals. I know that sounds motivational talk, but
No,
truly,
it's
it
profound.
well, it opened up to me because of the fact of like, I have really bad anxiety when it comes to getting out in front of people, being on stage, being on screen. But the biggest passion in my life was wanting to be an actor.
Huh.
Then next thing you know, I'm talking to people where I grew up through school, people calling me annoying and telling me to shut up, and now people listen to me. It's so freaking weird twist of events, but it's like you're standing in the goal of what you want to do. I don't want to be on camera, but I want to be on camera. So what's keeping me back from being on camera? Well, it's myself and Tom
And it's
Holland.
ourself worried about what everyone else thinks. Actually, I was doing like a lot of singing. I was recording some demos in Toronto up until like a couple years ago. And when I started like singing in public and playing a guitar when I was like 16 or 15, I think 15. And I would always have the biggest stage fright. I was always so like right before I went on, I would be like just sometimes even the first verse would be like trembling. And I realized it was because I was so worried, would they like me? Is this song going to be something that they enjoy? What are they going to think? When I changed my perspective to, I'm going to come up here and give them a gift, and they can receive it or they cannot receive it. But this is my gift to you. I mean, sometimes if I haven't sang in a while, it's like a little rusty. I can get some jitters, but if I get up there and same with public speaking, and I'm giving people a gift, there's a difference. Like I'm not looking like, I hope you think I'm good or you like me. This is a gift and you can receive it or you don't, but it has nothing to do with me. And you talked about like being our own worst enemies, but we can become our own best friend and we can extend that same empathy that we talk about giving others to ourselves, like, oh, okay, I am concerned about what people think of me when I walk into the grocery store in sweats. Is that because I don't love myself, or is it because I just feel like I'm a put together person and I want to always portray that like I'm pretty put together? If it's that I don't really like myself, okay, let me go into that a little bit more. For some reason, I never think I'm good enough. I never think I can do enough. And of course, I want to strive for the best, but can I also have this parallel striving for the best and accepting and loving myself for where I am? Because I found for me, I'm like you. Ego is a big thing for me. Being a singer, it's like we're vain and we're up in front of, like, ego is huge. And then also rigidity. I was like always having to do the best job. I wanted to do everything the very best I could. I could never give myself like a little grace. And I would create these impossible standards, which a lot of times I would meet them, but I was so driven and hustling, and which is all like positive words in our society, that I was a little bit rigid with everyone else and hustling and not giving other people grace, because I didn't give myself any grace. Why would I give you any grace? Right. Give you a little break. Like sometimes. And so now I'm really working on like, okay, I'm still making this book a bestseller. I'm still going out and doing all the things I need to do. And I'm going to be okay with where I'm at today. It doesn't mean I'm going to, slack off. I'm just going to be okay with me and not expect more out of myself than I can give. Pushing is, it's weird because like I'm always pushing still, but then also giving myself a little grace to be where I'm at, and others, because I think I was just so rigid with others. Like, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you? I would be the person who like, did you do this? Did you do that? Like, you're complaining about not making enough sales? Did you do this and this and this and this and this and this and that? Because if you didn't, it's your fault, like, which on one hand it kind of is, but on the other hand, there's also just like a balance of life and enjoying life too.
Yeah, think about being in the moment too, but also when it comes to goal setting, you don't want to set a goal that's so impossible to reach, and you don't want to set a goal that's so easily reachable. You want to set something in the middle that's going to take a lot of effort to get there, because once you
Mhm.
put in that effort, it's just like doing anything. When you do yard work or something afterwards and it's completed, you feel like a man. Or not even a man. You feel like just empowered. You're like, oh my God, I feel like I
I
could do
conquered the
anything. Yeah.
world.
But if you pay somebody to do it, then there's not that same effect. It might get done and it might be easier on you. But honestly, it's when I put in work to something, I've always been happy with the product of it. When I leave it to someone else to do it for me, it never either gets done or I just don't feel the same thing. And that's why in anything that you're passionate about, you should take every step that you take forward should be towards that thing. It should
Yeah.
be trying to accomplish that. If that means you want to start your own business, still start your own business. 9 to 5s aren't for everybody. 9 to 5s, I think anybody can who doesn't work a 9 to 5 can prove that. I work 1 a.m. So let me tell you something. 9 to 5s ain't me. I'm in bed usually by 5 p.m. But it's that aspect of you need to start working on looking inside of yourself and finding out what you want to do, because you don't want to be 60 when that hits you. You don't want to be like, oh my God, wait a minute, I should have did this. Life's already full of a lot of mischances and mistakes. You might as well not make another one and start doing what you want to do.
definitely. And I think it's never too late to do that. And also on that same note, some people are just more risk adverse, and the idea of starting your own business sounds good, and the idea of working for yourself is lovely. But if you're just a risk adverse person who really likes security, find a job that really works for you, because entrepreneurship means risking everything all the time almost. And so, but there's a lot of, especially nowadays, more flexible jobs out there that are work from home, or they're, and they still have all this security, but more flexibility. And I'd say for the person who's more of a 9 to 5er, but wants entrepreneurship lifestyle, those more flexible jobs might be the way, because it's really not for the faint of heart to own your own businesses. And the statistics are, most businesses go out of business before 5 years. And so
Right now, it's better to be a business entrepreneur from home. You don't want a brick and mortar place.
definitely not. Yeah. And then you can also get in with like a lot of low startup costs. You don't have the overhead that a brick and mortar business has. Yeah, I've never actually owned a brick and mortar, because I've felt that way for the longest time. That I used to do my fitness business. I would go to people's homes. I had my little bag of equipment, and we'd do stuff in their homes. And I remember I was like 22 and making 110 an hour. And I'm like, this is the life. I'm going to do it forever. And then the 2008, 2009 crash hit, and a lot of my clients were like losing their properties, losing their businesses. And then that trickle down effect was mine too. Right. And so, you know, nothing's forever. Not even a job though. I mean, that's one thing I think we do need to learn to take risks and learn to fail sometimes, so that when failures happen, again, it's those
Yeah.
dips. Failures happen. And if you know that, hey, I've failed and I've gotten right back up before, or, it's taken me a year, but I've gotten back up, then you can not be so afraid to take the leap, right? Because you've done
I'm
it.
not going to sing the lyric line, but the line goes, life is like a roller coaster, so filled with these ups and downs and these round and rounds. We're climbing to the top ever so fast now, but I feel the drop is getting closer. That's kind of like a good realization of what life
Yeah.
is, that a lot of times you're on this huge upswing and then there's the drop. You got to understand there is a drop there, but that doesn't mean you're going to keep dropping. You have the chance to
Yes.
pull yourself back up. I always say, like, Joe Rogan, I'm going to quote him, I don't care, he has a really good quote when it comes to the aspect of how people are like sandcastles, where we spend all this time and all this power and all this, I mean, just amazing effort creating this amazing castle in the sand, knowing that with one wave it could all be washed away.
Mm-hmm.
People are trying their hardest to make a mark, and it's amazing, but they want the instant payout and not the process. Life isn't forever. So far as I figured out, Elon Musk hasn't gotten us there yet, and I hope he doesn't, because I think the best thing about life is that there is an end to it, because that makes all this time that you have in this life so much more valuable.
Yes. Have you seen that movie? It was with Brad Pitt. It was like he was, oh, what character was he from Greek mythology? But he says that he's one of the Greek gods. He's Achilles. That's who he is. And he
Brad
says
Pitt?
to the other character, yeah, it's Brad. It's I can't remember the movie. The Troy, I think, is the movie.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, he says to the female character who is human, right, that um that's exactly what makes being human precious, is that every moment could be your last. And so you have to live every moment as if it could be your last, where the gods don't have that, in because they're going to live forever. No matter what they do, it's going to keep going. And it was this really poignant moment in the scene that you're like, yeah, every moment could be your last. And so you have to live like you're going to live forever as far as your health and things, and then live like it's going to be your last. Tell your loved ones that you love them. I mean, I'm so grateful. The very last thing I said to my brother was, I got up and gave him a big hug and a kiss on the cheek. I said, love you. See you later. That was the very last thing I said.
Damn, that's better than the last thing I get to say to my grandma. She said she has the Alzheimer's thing from like the brain tumor or whatever. But
Uh-huh.
we were watching Django, and it was like the 46th time in the matter of 15 minutes that she had asked me who I was. And I just go, will you shut up and watch Django? And she remembers that, but doesn't remember me. She just remembers a kid I always wear a hoodie. So she's like, oh,
Uh,
it's that boy in the hoodie. And my mom's like, yep. She keeps bringing up the fact you yelled at her about Django. I was like, why does she remember that and not remember all the times we spent by the pool together? That's amazing.
right. Well, you think about what causes impressions, um, it caused an impression on that guy that you gave him a ride home. That was something that most people didn't or wouldn't do.
He has a
Um,
podcast.
and then yeah, yeah, and he has a podcast.
He gave
But
me this. I've shot him out in an episode. He used to work at McDonald's. I went through the
oh,
drive-through and I was just like, can I get a toy? He's like, you want a toy? I'm like, yeah. He's like,
of
you're a
course.
grown-ass man. I was like, of course I want a toy. I'm a grown-ass man.
I think it's so important too to just like continue to enjoy the small things, right? Like if a toy still brings you joy, awesome. Like you don't have to always be flying around on the private jets, like you were saying, your friend, and like sometimes just a toy can bring you joy. And how awesome is that?
So I'm saying you just got to look at the optimistic side of things. Are you going to sit there and complain all day about everything that went wrong in your life? Or why don't you just celebrate that you made it through a day because someone out there didn't?
Yeah. And that's that balance, like I was saying, I find with myself. Sometimes I'm pushing myself so hard that nothing's ever good enough. But to balance it out with, you know what, you made it through the day, you were kind to people, and tomorrow's another day to do all you can, but also just enjoy it. And to take some days, actually, you were talking about, solitude and liking to be with your thoughts. My favorite thing to do when I make the time for it is go to a silent monastery and just hang out up there with the monks in the silence. And I tell you, by about the third day, I swear I'm out. It's in Big Sur, California, the one that I like to go to most. And it's like basically on the cliff, and you see all the waves and rocks and stuff. And the first few days, your mind is still like, oh, did I catch up with that email? And like, I have a thought and I'm like, I need to Google that, but the phone doesn't work. So I can't Google that. And by the third day, my mind is still enough that I'm sitting there on the patio of my little, they call it your cell, the room. And I can hear the blades of grass like going up against each other like a symphony. And it's like the whole world around me has just become this concert of waves and blades of grass and birds. And it's like I wasn't tuned into that station until about the third day. And I had to come, get still, get silent to really be able to tune into what's all around me all the time. And I don't even notice it.
Like I said, we're so minuscule in this thing that we don't even realize it's a whole symphony going on in the background.
Yeah.
It's really, that's why I really try and like when I can. Like the other day, I think it was like last Sunday, I smelled fall, like the
Hmm.
smell of what it seems like what the smell of leaves changing would be. And I
Yeah.
was like, what person? And I was just talking to people at work, like, do you smell that? It smells like fall outside. Oh my God, it's amazing. You should sit down with like a cup of coffee. And they're like, how old are you? And I'm like, in my 20s. And they're like, no kid in your 20s is thinking about smelling fall. And I'm like, man, that's missing out, dude. Like, there's
Right?
just so much that you don't even realize is going on in the grand scheme of things. I'm happy. I'm like, I don't think of myself as an old soul, but I like to, on the concept of I like to take in appreciation for a lot of things too.
I do feel like not everyone, but I do feel like a lot of people in their 20s are, waking up to, let's not miss this until we're 50. Let's like try to get life a little sooner so that we can enjoy more of it.
It's because everybody's dying so damn early when it comes to
Yeah.
like, people are losing friends that are the same age, or people are losing their parents or something. And it all has to do with health. All has come down to what you're eating. People are freaking eating, I
Yeah.
don't even know, cheeseburgers and stuff, and they're wondering why they're like dying at the age of 50 from clogged arteries. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
once you start seeing that, you wonder why the kids preaching vegan or preaching boba tea. It makes sense,
Right.
doesn't it?
Well, when people say, like heart attacks run in my family or stuff, I'm like, yeah, so do cheeseburgers. Like you guys have eaten the same way for generations. So it's not that profound that you would all have heart attacks. It's like maybe if cheeseburgers didn't run in your family, then heart attacks wouldn't run in your
Maybe if
family either.
somebody ran in your family, it might
Yeah, maybe
change.
if someone exactly, it's especially, when I was a trainer, and I still have friends from that time of my life, and we're still all obsessed with longevity and how to be as healthy as possible, and you really look at gene expression, and so little of it is what you naturally have. And there's so much that you actually can cause your genes to express in a different way than maybe your parents did with their cheeseburgers and negative thoughts. And even like how much thought life has to do with your physical health
I mean,
is just nuts, really.
you got to expound on that word thought. Which version of thought are you talking about?
So even, like kind of
Mind?
our mind,
Okay.
our like even our anxious thoughts, think about
Well, I was
the
saying, I think I
posture.
know what you mean, but thoughts means different things in today's terms. It's also slang for a very, very scandalous woman.
Oh,
Is she a thought? Like that's what it's THOT.
really? Oh, well, that's
That's
a
the
new
only
one for
thing I
me.
hate about millennials is the slang. It's getting freaking
It's funny. I'm
insane.
like the oldest millennial you can be. I think 1983 is like you're still a millennial, but you're really not.
You're on
So
the
I'm like, I'm
cusp.
the oldest millennial that is possible. Um, but no, you're like, think about like when you're anxious, what your physiology does. It's tense, right? Your physiology is tense when you're anxious. If you're depressed, your physiology is slumped, right? And so we can train our brain to think new thoughts. Like there's so much neuroscience now that shows like basically if you've thought an anxious thought or a depressed thought many, many times, you think about like water running through a rock and it causes erosion. You've eroded your brain in a certain pathway. But the great thing about the human brain is it's very malleable. It can change, and you can choose new thoughts. And it takes like practice, kind of like when your muscles are tight, and you just first start doing stretches, and maybe you first start working the counter muscle to start balancing your body out. At first it's really challenging until the muscles start getting on board with what's going on. And then they do what they're supposed to do. And you're like, oh, this exercise is easy. And I'm really flexible here now. And I'm really strong here. We can do the same thing with our brain, where the normal thought comes up. And if we are conscious enough, there's actually Joe Dispenza. I'm not sure if you've heard of him. He has a really great book with a horrible title called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. And it's ways to train your brain into the ways that you want to be. Like, for instance, um, I'm a really good talker. Sometimes I'm not that great at pausing and listening. And so one thing that I started doing, and I should probably get back in the habit, because now that I run a show, I notice I'm always trying to keep the show going, with the guests. So because it's on TV and we can't have breaks that make the audience feel awkward. And so I would start going into my mind and like kind of rehearse like athletes do the conversation before it happened. And like I'd walk into the coffee shop, I'd give him a hug, sit down. When he'd say something profound, I'd stop and come up with questions, because before I would come up with questions after I had left for 3 hours and wish I had asked them. But I started retraining my brain. But it's just like exercise. If you don't keep training it, it's just going to go back to the way it naturally goes,
Fall back
right?
into old patterns.
Back in old patterns, exactly. So, but it's really cool that just like we can train our body to be something more of what we choose, we can do the same thing with our brain. And then our brain affects our body because our brain affects our physiology so much.
It's
It's
a
incredible.
chain reaction.
Yeah.
Well, I think you've promoted enough other people's stuff. Why don't you promote where people can find you at, Reina?
Sure. You can find me at reina-rose.com. That's REINA little dash ROSE.com. But if you just go on Instagram, I'm the Soul Nutritionist. I love chatting with people there. I've got a lot about the new book coming out. It's called Sin Tastes Good, Nourishing Your Soul in an Empty Calorie World. And I get on and read a little excerpt from it every day. So if you want to check out what it's about before you buy, try before you buy. It's up on there. But yeah, I'd love to see you. It's the Soul Nutritionist, the little things underscores in between the words. So
I'll make sure I link that in the description. And thank you for listening to this episode Out of the Blank.